Good morning, class. We will begin the half-yearly syllabus from today of English language, that is grammar, comprehension, and vocabulary. You know the things that I teach, I will be teaching. So, before we begin, let me first commend you for successfully completing the first monthly. Okay, I hope you have all done well. The completion of the whole thing is commendable. Okay, so I want to commend you all for that. So let's begin the half-yearly syllabus. As you can see it written on the board, these topics, the verbs and the voice, active and passive. So these are topics of grammar. This is a single topic. Okay, so this is a topic of grammar. So we are going to begin with grammar. So this is from High School English Grammar. It is written as Active and Passive Voice, Chapter 22. Okay, I hope you can see the board clearly. Alright, so take the High School English Grammar book along with the use of words. Okay, because the same topic has been explained and discussed a little differently in both of these, right? High school and the use of words. So it is better that we relate to both the books, okay, while studying this topic, active and passive voice. All right, so in the use of words, the pages are 55 and 56. These two pages deal with verbs, active and passive, explanation, examples, and exercises. Alright? And in High School English Grammar, you will find the same topic named as active and passive voice, only that verbs is not mentioned in the title, in the caption, but you will find the word in the discussion, in the explanation of the chapter. The chapter is 22. Okay, once again, I am unable to tell you the page because I have a different book from you. Okay, I have this book. So this is the chapter, chapter 22, active and passive voice. And from the use of words, let me show you the page that begins this topic, page 55. So from use of words, it is in here. All right, verbs, active and passive. All right. I believe you have studied this topic before in one of your previous classes. It's okay if you have not. If you don't remember, it's fine. We shall have a detailed discussion, and you must, as always, go through the chapters and the pages of both the books, of all three of the books, talking about the whole syllabus. Go through the pages, read all the explanations given there in your books, including the examples, because you will find plenty of examples, and also you will find questions to ask, okay? Things that you don't understand. So, in order to clarify your queries, clarify the confusions, you are to read, okay? Also, of course, to understand the things better, okay? So, don't forget to read it before you start doing the exercises. For now, it will just do if you listen carefully, pay attention, try to understand, and also keep a note copy or a notebook with you so that you can take notes, all right, for future reference so that you can go back to your notes, refer to those, try and relate your writings with your readings, all right? Okay, so let's begin. What is voice? What is voice? Do we know that? So, voice is something which tells us, let us forget about this thing for a while. Let us first concentrate on voice. I will come back to this, things to be remembered later on in a while. So, voice, what is this? Voice tells us if the subject of a sentence is doing something, okay? So the first thing that the voice does is it tells us if the subject of the sentence is doing something or does something, okay? Does or is doing something. It does one more thing, the voice, okay? So the voice does another thing, which is if the action is received by someone or something. Okay, I hope you can clearly see the difference between these two. The subject does something, which means the subject remains active, right? So in the first case, the voice is active voice. Okay, in the second thing that we explained, if the action is received by someone or something, there is no subject which does something actively, is there? In this explanation, there is no one or nothing doing something actively, right? What is happening here is someone or something receives the action. So, unlike being active, the verb in such case remains the opposite, which is clearly passive. Okay? So, in active voice, the subject actively does a work. Because we are talking about doing a work, performing an action, we are dealing with verbs. Okay? In the second case, where the subject is not actively doing something, but receiving the action, it is passive. The verb remains passive. Okay? So once again, we are talking about verbs. That is why it is mentioned like that in your use of words book. Alright? So the first thing which is done by the voice is showing the activity, the physical activity of the subject, okay? And the second thing which it does, the voice, is that someone or something receiving the action, being passive, not being active, okay? I hope you understand that. You will understand it more or better when you start reading it from your books, okay? Chapter 22, high school, and page 55, the use of words. It would be better if you note all the things down in your copy, okay? Things to be read, things to be remembered, things that you understand while attending the class, okay? Let us move on to some examples. Before we go to examples, you need to know what are the things that you need to remember. So the first thing you need to remember is, while talking about active and passive voice, clearly let me tell you that we will change the voice from active into passive, also from passive into active, all right? In exercises from both the books, the use of words as well as high school grammar, okay? So for that, you need to remember that we are talking about only transitive verbs. Why so? I'll explain it in a while. So only the sentences that have transitive verbs can be changed from active into passive voice or vice versa, all right? Because transitive verbs and only this have objects, okay? Because transitive verbs have verbs plus objects. Right? This is the structure of transitive verbs used in a sentence, right? We are talking about changing sentences. So the sentences that are formed in this way, only those can be changed from active into passive or from passive into active. Now let us come to some examples. The first sentence, the shop sells exclusive items. The shop sells exclusive items. So this is the subject. Remember that we are not identifying subjects, verbs, and objects. Okay? We finished that in the first monthly. We are now talking about active and passive voice, but in order to learn how to change from active into passive, we must remember to identify these things. Okay? So this is the subject, this is the verb, and this exclusive items is the object. Right? So the subject is or does something actively, right? The shop sells exclusive items. The subject is active. So we can say this is written, the verb is written in active voice, right? So this is an example of active voice. If we want to change this into passive voice, what will we have to do? Okay, I shall just write the passive voice on this side. I hope you can see the board. Okay. So we are talking about the first sentence there. The shop sells exclusive items. In order to transform it from active into passive, we must begin by changing the object and making it the subject, right? So what will we do is we have changed the object into the subject, right? Remember that we are writing the passive form now. Okay, the passive form of the first sentence. Exclusive items. After that, what do we have to do? We have to add auxiliary verbs or verbs to be in different forms depending on the tenses of the verbs. Alright? So, in things to be remembered, another thing will be the tenses. Alright? So, tenses are very important in this. Sales is in present form, present indefinite or present simple, right? So, as it is present simple, the verb to be in this sentence will remain present simple, but depending on the subject, depending on the number and person of the subject, alright? So, this subject here is in plural form, right? Exclusive items, this is plural. What will we write? Are, right? Are goes with plurals for present simple, right? So we need to add the auxiliary verb depending on the number and person and also the tense. Exclusive items are, the next thing we do is we write the past participle form of the main verb in the active voice. Alright? So we always, with no exception, use the past participle form of the main verb used in the active voice. Remember that. Okay? So exclusive items are sold. Sold is the past participle of sell, right? So you need to remember as well the present, past and past participle forms of different verbs. Alright? Revise it once again. You will find it in the book. I will mention that in the next class or in the study notes as well. So revise those if you need to. All the past participle forms of different verbs. You need to learn them. You need to remind yourselves of those. Okay? So exclusive items are sold. The next thing we do is we add the word by, which is a preposition. In some cases, we may add to or with, depending on the meaning or the need of the sentence. But in most of the cases, we add the word by. Okay? And finally, what we do is we turn the subject into the object. Okay? So these are the 5 things that we do while changing a sentence from active voice into passive voice. Alright? So let us first practice doing this thing. Then we will move on to discussing turning passive voice into active. You will find this thing, turning passive into active, comparatively easy. Right? Easier. This one will be easier than this. Okay, let us talk about one more example. I hope you have understood this thing. It's okay if you don't understand right away because you will have time to read, to study by yourselves and go through all the examples, all the other examples from the books, both the books. Okay. Moving on to the next example. See if you can read that sentence on that side. So it is written, I have found my lost umbrella. This clearly, once again, is the subject, which is doing the verb, the action. Have found is the verb because it talks about the action. My lost umbrella, this whole thing, this whole part, that phrase, my lost umbrella, is the object. Okay? So this is the subject, this is the verb, and this is the object, my lost umbrella. Alright? So as we can see, the subject is actively doing something. So the voice in here is active once again. Because the subject actively does something, the voice becomes active in this sentence. Let us change this thing into passive. So once again, let us write the object as the subject in this case. Can you all see the board? Hope you can. Alright. So my lost umbrella. That is the object which we have turned into subject. So my lost umbrella. Notice that the verb in here is in the perfect form, right? In the perfect tense. Have found is present perfect, alright? You will find a chapter dealing with the tenses, okay, in this term. So you will study that chapter. You can study it before our next class. Chapter 24. It is better that you study it. Just read it once. Reading it once will do. Then we will have an elaborate discussion. Okay. So this is in the present perfect. So we write our verb to be or auxiliary verb in this tense. What will we write? My lost umbrella. Remember that we change this thing, the auxiliary verb, depending on the number and person of the subject. Okay? So with I, we do not write has. Right? We all know that. With I, we have to write have. But with other things, we write has. We can write has, right? So my lost umbrella, this is singular in number. That is why we can write has. Has been. This is the thing. This is the word that we add while changing the perfect tenses from active into passive. Okay? Only in perfect tenses. For continuous tenses, this word changes into another thing. We will come to that. Okay? For continuous, the word is being. I will discuss this elaborately later on. Okay, so has been, have found. So found is the past participle of this verb. Okay, so has been found. by me. We change the subject into object. While doing that, we change the word. We need to change the word. While writing the subject, we write like I. While making it into the object, we have to write me. Okay? I cannot be the object. I remains as the subject. Me has to be the object. Okay? So you will find different forms of subject, different subjective and objective forms of words, of pronouns in your book. We shall discuss that later on as well. Or do we have? Okay, we have time. So let me just quickly show it to you. So the subject of I becomes me, he becomes him, she, her, you remains the same. Okay? This is the word that remains the same in subjective and objective forms. We becomes us as object. They becomes them. Alright? Like that. Okay? So you will need this while changing a sentence from active into passive. Okay. Now let me remind you of the steps once again while we change a sentence from active voice into passive. We firstly turn the object into the subject. The next thing we do is add auxiliary verbs or verbs to be. Depending on the number and person of the subject. Okay? For singular subject, this becomes singular. For plural ones, this also changes into plural. We also depend on the tenses. So number, person of the subject, and the tense of the verb. Okay? Then we add the past participle form of the main verb in the active voice. Then we add by, and finally we change the subject into the object. So that is the basic thing. These are the basic steps which we follow while turning an active voice into passive. So let us end the class there. You will read chapter 22 from High School English Grammar. Also page 55 from the use of words. We will talk about the exercises in the next class. Alright? Stay well.